a moment, once we get through all the introductions, I'm going to drop a link to a sign-up form in the chat to have everyone mark their attendance on the meeting.
Pues mira, ahora lo que voy a hacer es que voy a poner aquí acceso a una forma, cuestionario en cual uno puede firmar en cual estamos presentes.
All right, get that posted into the chat in just a moment. In the meantime, I just would like to run through some Zoom rules. Antonio is here translating. Has anyone indicated the need for translation?
¿Hay alguna persona que ha indicado que necesita traducción? Y voy ahora a poner una información en chat, pero mientras tanto, ¿hay alguien que necesita traducción en español?
Okay, well, Antonio, if you don't mind sticking around just so we can make sure that, you know, if anyone joins a few minutes late, that we still have the service available.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, usually we wait 20, 30 minutes.
Great.
So whenever you're ready, let me know.
Okay. Well,
or I'll wait 20 minutes and let you know if I'm kept your permission to sign off, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. I'll put that in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us while we get up and running here this evening. As a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. And everyone, if you haven't yet, please drop your name, organization, any preferred pronouns in the neighborhood you're representing into the chat box so that we know who is present. In a few moments, I will pull up a link to a form that you can all click on and use to register rather your participation in the meeting for the evening so that we know who is present. Please do that at some point during the course of the meeting. In the meantime, please keep yourself muted at all times unless you are called on to speak. And please use the chat box for asking questions during presentations, and we will leave time for Q&A at the end of each section. We will continue to use the chat feature throughout the evening's meeting as well to share important links and information. So keep your eyes open there. Everyone should have the ability to chat publicly and privately with members of the folks that are here this evening. And ensure we will have some small breakout groups this evening. So please do make sure that when you're in those breakout groups that everyone has the chance to speak, that everyone sort of takes opportunities to share their piece and then steps back and allows others to speak. And as we've just kind of covered, we do have Spanish translation available. If anyone needs it, please continue to sort of raise your hand or mention it in the chat, and we will make that accommodation.
Sí, Loren revisó todas las cosas. Quiere decir que si alguien habla en español y está aquí, por favor, denle una indicación en el chat.
We'll get underway. So thanks everyone for joining this evening. I want to start the meeting with some updates from the working groups. And before I hand the mic over to the various working groups which have updates to present this evening, I did want to provide a quick update for those of you that joined us at the September public BFAC meeting. We did a big breakout group discussion at that meeting where we tried to identify what each group and what the public feels strongly about the priorities needing to be for this group as we move forward in this new normal that we now live in. And I just wanted to share back with everyone what the end result of that is and what the process looks like going forward. The steering committee has met, and we It took some time to sort of review the notes, review the report outs from those breakouts, and identify the priorities that were sort of repeated over and over again for multiple groups. We have summarized that, and we will be sending a document out to each of the working groups, asking them to review that list and identify the ways in which their working groups can identify priorities and sort of choose which ones make the most sense to them based off of that list. The goal will be to have those priorities hopefully identified shortly after the new year by the end of January. We have some new working group chairs coming online in the next couple of months, and we hope that this will help set their priorities and their goals for each working group in the year ahead. So stay tuned. We will likely be reporting back on that in the March 2021 public meeting. And with that, Elise, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and taking the mic to share updates from the fundraising working group.
Sure, happy to. Thanks, Lauren. It's good to see everyone this evening. My name's Elise Springle. I'm a steering committee member, and I'm a member of the fundraising working group. Our co-chairs couldn't be here this evening, but Paul and Claire co-chair that group. The fundraising group has been hard at work. I guess the big highlights since our last meeting are, one, that we were able to secure a CPA who's going to be volunteering her time to help with accounting if we start to take in money. So that's been a great piece. A big shout out to Nicole St. Louis, who put a job description together and was able to find a volunteer to do that. Otherwise, continuing to work on just trying to figure out the best ways forward to ensure that the Boston Food Access Council can raise funds. So exploring the potential of 501c3 status, as well as other potentials such as having a fiscal sponsor or something else, so that we can try to raise money to support the work that's going on here and make this a very equitable, accessible group to everyone involved. That's basically it. I will turn it over to the next one.
Caribe, can we have you take the floor if you're here for the policy and advocacy group?
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Caribe Ibe, and I am part of the steering committee as well. And then I think most of you know, the policy and advocacy group have had difficulties just finding a chair for the group. But I am glad to bring up that we have found a chair. Her name is Sarah Manago, and just a brief description of Sarah. So she has been a member of the Junior League of Boston for 4 years, and she has served as the chair of the JL Boston STEM program. She's a huge advocate for ethical global AI policy, for the protection of children, and an equity in STEM education. And she currently chairs the K-12 Education Outreach Committee for the Institute for Operation Research and Management Science. And we're very happy to welcome Sarah to the group. And that's basically all the update we have for this working group. We are convening very briefly just to have Sarah accustomed to the members, and then also chart what our policy goals for 2021 would be.
Great, thank you, Caribe. And then Joy, can we ask you to give an update on the Community Outreach Engagement and Education Group?
Yes, I am Joy Gary, a member of the steering committee, the BFAC steering committee. So for our committee, we are in the process of searching for people who are interested in being co-chairs for the committee. Our hope is to have our vote to take place on December 15th at our next meeting, which is from 6:30 to 7. But so far, in our last discussion, we discussed just some of the goals, some of the preliminary goals of the group, which mainly is to be able to develop an outreach strategy, develop a communication strategy, and with both having equity centered in all of how we're communicating and outreaching to the wider community in the process of creating a memorandum of understanding for BFAC organizational members, so that we're having all of our organizations deeply connected to the work that we're doing or trying to do. And so hopefully by next month, we'll have more information on those terms. And if you're interested in being a co-chair, I do encourage you to reach out to me or reach out to BFAC directly. And we, I think we'll have our email at the end of the presentation. And then we can discuss what are some of the roles and responsibilities and where we're intending to go to in the future. We'd love for anyone who's passionate about outreach and about the community to be involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. And I will just echo what Joy just said. First, I just dropped our email address into the chat. If you have any questions about being involved as a working group chair, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We members of the steering committee can chat with you about what that looks like and what the expectations are. And likewise, this is a kind of a good segue, but the fourth working group, which I will go back to sharing my screen here. The fourth working group was not represented in the list of updates because we're actually going to turn the mic over here to the Equitable Boston Food Ecosystem presentation in a moment. That group has been working under the Mayor's Food Access Agenda working group. And that fourth working group is really formed as a means for initiatives that help further the Mayor's Food Access Agenda, which was announced about a year and a half ago now, a little bit, or September 2019. This group that we'll be turning over to present in a moment has been working to sort of analyze what needs to be shifted on that agenda, what needs to be prioritized on that agenda in light of the current moment. As you'll see through their presentation, they have a deadline later this month when they'll be turning that report over to the city. But what I want to acknowledge is that working group will continue, and that working group will also need a co-chair. So if you find yourself particularly interested in the work that gets presented this evening, if you've been involved in that project and you're interested in continuing to see that forward, please know that sometime after early in the new year, we will need to run elections for a chair or co-chair of that working group as well. And if you're interested, as I said, please don't hesitate to reach out. And so with that, I'm excited to turn the presentation over to the team from the Equitable Boston Food Ecosystem Project to present on what they have been working on.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's nice to see many of your faces and names on the screen. My name's Jennifer Valenzuela. I'm here from an organization called Health Leads. We're a nonprofit based here in Boston, but we work across the country. And we are an innovation hub that we're looking to unearth and address the deep societal roots of racial inequity that are impacting our health. And as COVID has been going on, there is definitely work to be done around the food insecurity that's happening across our country. But being here in Boston was seeing quite a bit of things going on with the food insecurity and hunger. And so Health Leads has been involved in this project that Lauren just mentioned. And so tonight we have until about 7:30. We're going to talk about this project that's been going on with some of the folks here around the table right now, actually, and community members throughout Boston, and hopefully getting more of you involved in this process, and also looking to get your feedback later in this hour with the work that we're doing. So let me share my screen, and then we'll get started on there. Let's see here. Lauren, can you see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah? Okay, great. Okay, so well, I'll get to that in a second. Okay, here's what we're hoping to do today. We're going to introduce to you like what is this project. It's called the Equitable Boston Food Access Project. We did a vote and this was the name that got the most votes. So we'll give a little bit more information about what that is. We want to share with all of you about what the design was, what the participation has been so far to date. We're really happy with the amount of community and organizational participation that's been happening in this project. We have some data now from community member engagement, and so we're going to review the themes that have been coming up. And then we want to break out into small groups. We actually might have a little bit more time now than the 15 minutes, so we'll see where we are when we break out. And we're going to break all of us out into some small groups. And then we're going to come back as a group and talk about what we talked about. And then we'll talk about the next steps and how people can get more involved with this work. Okay, so that's the next hour and 10-ish minutes that we have together. So this is just to give a little bit of background around the food insecurity and what's been happening. So the graphic on your right-hand side is the data that was pulled out when the CHNA was done, the Community Health Needs Assessment was done last year around food insecurity. And what we wanted you to see was back pre-COVID, the percent of adults that were reporting that the food that they were buying wasn't lasting and they needed more. And the neighborhoods where we really were seeing the most food insecurity is Dorchester, these two bars, and Mattapan and East Boston. And so we say that because we know that with COVID, everything has just been, multiplied times 10 when it comes to the food insecurity. And so we have a belief that while the food insecurity was already really high in those neighborhoods, we believe like it's just that much higher in those same neighborhoods. And that the food insecurity is potentially following the same patterns that we were seeing before COVID. So there's been a lot of different surveys that have been done across the state, across the city, across the country, really, around how COVID is impacting people and around food insecurity as well. We see stories about it all the time in the news, and many of us are working in this with our clients or with our neighbors or friends and supporting one another during this. For Boston, one of the data sources that we had has said that the food insecurity has doubled since the pandemic started. We know that Project Bread, that's the hotline, the food hotline, they have had, I think their numbers have gone times 8, like 8 times the number of calls that they were getting at a period has increased that much. We also pulled together data that many of the small community organizations had been doing themselves. So for example, Maverick Landing Community Services, they are offering food to their community members, and they started doing some surveying with folks that were standing in line waiting for food. And what they found was that over 75% of the people that were reporting that they needed more assistance. In East Boston, we're seeing a really large percentage of people there where they have $0 coming in whatsoever. They're not eligible for unemployment insurance. They're not eligible to apply for SNAP, or they're too scared to apply for SNAP. And so really just no income whatsoever coming in. And so the food insecurity is really intense there with no other options for resources. So this is just really setting the stage of, we know this is bad, but we wanted to make sure we were able to bring the data together to start finding out like what are all of our folks across the city finding. So back in August, so Health Leads, the organization where I am, we've been doing direct outreach to Boston Public School families in 4 different schools in the city of Boston. And we started that back when COVID started, where it was direct outreach that was happening one-to-one with the families to make sure, like, do you know about the food resources that are in your neighborhood? And do you know how to access them? Like, you may have heard about it because it was on the news. There was a lot of publications around that, but do you actually know how to get it so that the food is in your home and you're eating it? And there was a lot of barriers that we were finding over and over and over again. And so as the months were going on with COVID, just having a lot of informal conversations with folks across the city and realizing there's a theme that there are many barriers here for all of our residents of Boston around accessing food, and many, many challenges that we're coming across, that different people were coming across. This first conversation came together. I see some of you around on this call that were at that first meeting. It was about 20 plus organizations that are providing emergency food access to just come and talk about the challenges. What are we seeing? What are we experiencing with our clients? What do we know are the barriers that we have happening right now? And the hope out of that call was to see, is there a need for us to have more conversation, or can we connect with other people that are out in the city that are already working on this, and we'll just contribute to efforts that are already going on. What we learned is we contacted the city and we got connected to the Office of Food Access, and the Office of Food Access had been inundated with the amount of need that had been coming through over the months. They were getting, I think they're a staff of 3, maybe 4, and we're getting hundreds of phone calls every week for access for food, for people saying like, can you help us with food? They built up a food delivery system, and they were just flooded with the day-to-day getting the food in people's homes. And so there hadn't really been a lot of time for an assessment to be done to really look at what's working, what's not working. And so when this group in August reached out to the city, they said, your timing is great. We're finally getting to the place where we can kind of pull our heads up and start looking at what's working, what's not working. Do you guys want to continue on with what's happening? And let's get this connected to the BFAC. Let's get it connected to the Boston Food Access Council, because they're really the group where this type of work would belong. So we got connected to the BFAC and started having conversations about how can we merge these two groups together. So in that first meeting, over that first month in August, what was discussed was the different things that we were talking about as a group. One of the big things that continues being talked about is the cost of food, and that SNAP is not enough to really fulfill what people need that actually do get SNAP. And there's no extra money to absorb it. Really, like, gold standard would be, can we get more money in people's pockets so that they can go buy the food that they need and be able to have the independence and agency to get what's needed for their home. But there were a lot of other barriers that we were really able to come up with. But knowing that just the folks around that virtual table, that there was a lot more people to get engaged with, this was just really the beginning of the conversations. So those conversations resulted in talking with the Office of Food Access, talking to the Boston Food Access Council, and the Office of Food Access said, we're going to give you a grant to continue this work and to bring in community members so that we can really start understanding on the ground what's working and what's not working for residents. So on here, you can see we have a set number of goals of what we were trying to accomplish with this grant, $50,000. And really, like what Lauren said just a few minutes ago, one of the working groups here is the Mayor's Food Access Agenda. And so it was really to look at, like, let's look at that Mayor's agenda that had just been released, I think, 4 months before COVID happened. And so what needs to be rethought about on that? And does anything need to change? Does anything stay the same? One of the other goals behind this project is can help identify where the city should really be owning any of this work, where the city can catalyze it. BFAC is an example of a city catalyzed project where they are in supporting, but they're not leading it and running it. And then city-led, an example of that would be like Project Bread, where Project Bread will receive funds and the city is supporting that as well. The city catalyzed and the city-led are really similar. And so the city wants to know, like, what are the things that we should be doing and what are things that we can look at to private funders, to other sectors to support in this work. And BFAC is one of those. Like, I think part of this work, some of the questions are going to be, what could BFAC own and work on in the future? And then the other thing that really was hoped for to come out of this project was having community-led recommendations in this. And so of that $50,000, we have over half, almost half of that is going back into the community through either paying participants $25 an hour for the engagement that they might have in the meetings, in the interviews, in the groups. And then we also paid 10 organizations, we'll talk about them in a little bit, for helping us doing the recruiting of community members and the bridging of helping people be able to be in the virtual space. And also actually tonight, so we still have some of that funding. So tonight we would like to be able to pay community members that are in this meeting. And so in a minute, I'll put up, when I'm done talking, I'll put up a link. And if you are a community member here that's not being paid, I'm being paid by my organization to be here. So I don't expect any kind of payment. If you are here as a community member, as a volunteer, please put your information in there and then we'll mail you something. You'll have something in the mail in about a week or so. Okay, so the project overall, what started in August as this little ad hoc conversation with a few people has become now where we're meeting on a weekly basis. So we meet every Thursday from 1 until 2 p.m. where we're just able to talk about the project, the progress that we're making on it, things that we're seeing, an opportunity for people to really share around the work and the different topics that are coming up. We did the assessment. So that first slide that gave the information around the data, we partnered with HRIA, Health Resources in Action, and they did a very small compilation of all of the data that we could get our hands on in the city that different people have done across the city over the last 8 months. And they pulled that together in a bunch of slides, and just for us to really be able to set the story, set the stage around what's going on here in Boston for food insecurity during COVID. We just completed, about 2 weeks ago, we did 3 design sessions. People might know them more as like focus groups. And we had 30 plus community members that came to that. And we asked the general question, like, how would you design an equitable food system? And Hannah's going to talk about that a little bit later and what we found from that. We've also done one-on-one interviews. I think we're up to 53 different individuals that have happened across the city, and asking similar questions to the focus groups, really asking folks like what their experience has been during COVID and how can it be done better. What we're doing tonight is one of our shareback sessions where we tell everybody, like, here's what's been heard so far. These are the themes that are coming up. Does that resonate? Do you think something's missing? What is it in there that really sparks the light for you when you hear it? And then based off of what we hear again from tonight from the group, we're going to take all of that information. We're going to build some recommendations that's going to go into this report to the city. And then on December 15th, we're going to come back to whomever wants to come to the meeting, and we're going to come back with, like, these are the recommendations based off of the themes that we heard and the feedback that we heard from everyone. We built out these recommendations. These are the recommendations. Did we get this right? Do we need to make some adjustments? And then after that conversation on the 15th, then we finish up the report, and then we'll turn it into the city on December 18th. So that's the overall of the project. And so I'm going to pass it to Zakia, who's going to talk to us about the community engagement component and the demographics. And if you have questions as we're going along, please put them in the chat and we'll make sure we're able to get to those before we go to the breakout. Okay, Zakia, take it away.
Good evening. As Jen said, I'm Zakia Alake, and Health Leads brought me on to help with community outreach and engagement. And I'm happy tonight to share with you the names of the community groups that came forward and helped us to recruit and engage people from their neighborhoods or communities of interest in the group sessions as well as the one-on-one. So as you can see, a couple are members of BFAC. We have AV Rose Farms. I believe Dominique Garner is here in Lesbi Gay Urban Foundation. They are a new member that came into the project. I was able to recruit this organization through my work with a coalition that came together to work on COVID and its impact on Black communities in Boston. We have the Brazilian Workers Center, and now we have Chinatown Main Street program, the Haitian Women of Boston, Mary B. Lomax Pam Health and Wellness by Design, which works around the Camden, Lenox Camden, Boston Housing Authority development and that neighborhood, Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, Maverick Landing Community Services, Metro Boston Alive, and the New England United for Justice. Some of these groups have not been active in this space before. For example, Metro Boston Alive, which is located in just outside of or on the edge of what is called Nubian Square, formerly Dudley Square, and across from Madison Park High School and the Nubian Square Post Office. Usually for the past 35 years, more associated with helping active addicts find recovery, but had been able to expand to work in helping people access services such as those offered at food pantries and the like. They were very happy to join into this effort. Is anybody here in BFAC as one of these organizations? Okay. Let's see. We recognize that we need to expand our efforts to reach the various Asian communities who are our neighbors, and we're working on that now and have been. So more will be shared about that over the last few weeks of this phase of the project. But we are pleased that we can now count Chinatown Main Street program, as I said, as one of our participating community organizational members. Now, this slide, we show that we were able to include a total of 82 community residents in the one-on-one interviews and the group focus sessions. And again, one of the things that immediately sticks out is that we don't have a fair representation of the various Asian communities that make up the city of Boston. But look at what we do see. Any questions?
Zakia, why don't we keep going and then we'll get to the questions after it once Hannah gets through her piece, okay?
Okay, that's true.
Tell me when to go on. Okay.
Neighborhoods of participating community members. Earlier, when Jen was presenting, she pointed out where food insecurity was highest in the city of Boston. And we can see that we had pretty good representation from some of those neighborhoods, but we still need to know more about what's going on in the neighborhoods that are hardest hit by food insecurity during COVID. So for example, 10% of our respondents hail from East Boston, but East Boston is one of the 3 hardest hit neighborhoods in Boston. So we really could use more participation from that neighborhood in terms of responding to the survey. Next slide, please. These are perilous times, and we can see from this slide that employment, even full-time employment, does not guarantee that you won't experience food insecurity, because I think it's 43%. My math is not that good, but I did prepare for this. Are employed, but still report food insecurity. So that speaks volumes about the depth of work that we need to be engaged in. Can't see. I don't think there's anything else I want to emphasize about this slide. No. We'll talk some more about it when we break into small groups.
Sounds good. Thanks, Zakia. All right, I'm gonna pass it over now to my colleague Hannah, who led us through the design sessions, the focus group sessions, and so she's gonna share with us more about that process and what we've learned so far from it. Hannah?
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Zakia. So as Jen mentioned, there's really been a few different ways that we've been gathering information. So the early surveys from a lot of the organizations who've been a part of this group, the one-on-one interviews, as well as the design sessions. And the design sessions, which I ran with another facilitator, focused primarily on food assistance programs, whereas, as Jen mentioned earlier, the interviews had a little bit of a broader scope. We've been able to really go through some of the data, some of the stories from community members who participated in the design sessions, with Equitable Boston Food Access Project group members, as well as my co-facilitator, to identify different themes that kind of bubbled to the top for each of us. We're also working with another group that's still in the process of reviewing and analyzing some of the interview information. However, they were able to kind of, before our meeting today, share some of what they're seeing and what is reinforced in that interview data. So this is just a high-level overview given our time, but there's certainly more information for people who are interested in learning more. And Jen will talk about that in a little bit. But the first theme was about choice and accessibility. So community members shared the challenges of matching food stamp allocations with the cost of fresh, healthy food that meets different dietary restrictions and requirements for different health conditions, as well as culturally appropriate foods. And it was noted that when the stimulus checks came in, that allowed for more flexibility and more choice. However, once those dollars ran out, people had to kind of figure out new ways to access food effectively. A short-term suggestion has been to strengthen the support for families who make just over the threshold to qualify for food assistance, but may still be having some challenges in making ends meet. Community members also routinely, so that was more about choice, but community members also routinely discussed accessibility issues, which includes consistency in program hours and services. And they also noted that people of an elderly age or people facing disabilities or different health conditions or people who did not speak English faced a greater disadvantage often when it came to accessing resources. They also noted that transportation continues to be a barrier to accessing food, and some residents reported visiting multiple sites to get their groceries, and suggested that there be efforts to really strengthen the different delivery systems. Another major point that was discussed around accessibility was around just the availability of food. So like the seasonal closings of farmers markets and reduced ability to access fresh fruits and vegetables because of that. And with the pandemic, non-perishable foods now being in high demand and harder to find. So the next theme is around affordability, which again was something that the initial group and I believe the mayor's original agenda also highlighted, but similar to choice and accessibility, affordability is really a huge contributing factor. Some community members mentioned that food stamps monthly increase did not actually match the food prices, especially with the increases from the pandemic. And this came up probably, I think, in every one of the design sessions, was a desire to connect with local farmers directly for quality food rather than finding it through a grocery store or vendors. The farmers markets came up a lot during, the farmers markets and the food boxes came up a lot during our conversations. But also not only should food be affordable, but also should maintain a level of quality that's sometimes not found in food assistance programs. And there's a desire for, if not farmers markets, more options for grocery stores like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods and less resource neighborhoods. And also that food should be culturally appropriate. Other suggestions were that vouchers could be offered for essential household items so that to free up money so that residents could have other financial resources for food. Community members also discussed the price variances across neighborhoods that they had noticed and were wondering, how could the city offer incentives for businesses and markets to change so that the prices would be more consistent across the city. The next theme is around community support and community source solutions. So the different neighborhoods represented and communities represented by the folks who came to the design sessions shared a lot of the informal networks that they have for supporting each other, such as transporting food for family members and neighbors, and sharing information, sometimes word of mouth, sometimes through, giving someone else a flyer that they weren't using or they already gotten the information. And community members expressed a strong desire for community-driven food systems and also contributing to greater affordability as well as sustainability, including growing their own food and a more direct connection to farmers markets with SNAP benefits. Direct cash payments were also suggested as an immediate remedy for families who are struggling to access food. So again, back to kind of the affordability theme as well. And there were suggestions to the city to not only address hunger and economic issues concurrently. So for example, hiring individuals who are homeless to prepare or deliver food. And finally, just of note in this, just that residents suggested strengthening already established programs instead of creating new initiatives, like expanding programs within schools, churches, health centers, and adding things like community refrigerators and community kitchens were specifically mentioned. The next theme is dignity. So community members shared experiences where they felt looked down upon, as if the people who are working in their different programs to help assume the worst about the community members because they were accessing the services, and ultimately it was not a helpful experience. And additionally, community members felt that some of the processes, especially around signing up for and maintaining their SAP program, was invasive and based on a general lack of trust. Ultimately, there was a very strong sentiment around food justice is about dignity and trust. and residents should not feel ashamed for seeking assistance. And there were suggestions made for more trauma-informed service providers, sensitivity training, addressing issues around stigma, especially for men.
Hannah,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, because I seen like, I think it was more so people, not people that are experiencing homelessness, to prepare and serve the food, because I seen that came up in like the third part of it, but you missed that for those people to be served. It's not about, it wasn't for those people to prepare the food, but to actually have food. How is food actually being served to those individuals as well? Not just elders and people with disabilities, but how's food serving the people actually on the streets, and let the farmers and the workers handle the food.
Yeah, that was actually, that was a new theme we haven't shared back from the interviews yet, but Monique brings up, I think, another really important point. So this is where I really wish we had a little bit more time to go through even more of the data, but around, especially in accessibility, ensuring that there are more effective ways for reaching people who are experiencing homelessness, especially around accessibility of hot meals, whether that's microwaves, so kind of beyond what currently exists, but also thinking, I think, holistically around, it's around the community support and community source solutions is not just, all these things are really connected. And I think that's one thing that our community members, both in the interviews and in the design sessions, really raised up, is that this is just one piece of it, and it's time to really look at the bigger picture beyond just food, except food access. And our last theme was around communication. So across the board, there's challenges in receiving consistent, reliable communication about where to find food. So really the community members shared that one method of communication is not enough. We need lots of different ways for different folks to get the information that they need to access food, as well as a call for stronger coordination across agencies for accurate information. The community members shared that communication needs to be community-based. There's suggestions around parent groups, text messages. I think one of our participants shared, if our local politicians can reach us and text us about getting out to vote, they can certainly, share information about, the food pantries or the different programs and hours and changes. Social media, phone calls, flyers, having paid ambassadors, especially paid ambassadors with lived experience, and healthcare workers. Those are all different modes of communication that community members recommended. I think also kind of looking back to that support and community source solution, community members expressed frustration in not being involved in the entire process when it comes to establishing different services and programs, and that there should be more intentional outreach and feedback loops that really authentically engage the community moving forward. And finally, community members recognize that there just needs to be communication in many different languages. So again, back to making sure that everyone is getting the information, not just through different modes, but languages as well. And in all of the design sessions, just to wrap up, community members said that many of these issues existed before the pandemic, and now they're just amplified due to multiple changes in monthly budgets, children now being at home for remote learning, and especially that link between affordability and demand during the pandemic. So that's a lot, but we'll open it up for questions before we get ready to move to the small groups for your thoughts and feedback.
So it looks like we had a couple questions come in during the chat that I just want to scroll back and call out. Marcos, who's a steering committee member for BFAC, asked, how are the participation targets being set to determine where additional work needs to be done?
Yeah, that's a great question, Marcos. So this has been a really fast process. When we did this, we intentionally wanted to do outreach to the Black community and to the Latinx community, knowing that those were two of the populations that were getting hit hardest with COVID and with food insecurity. We didn't put targets against it. We actually exceeded what I thought we would be able to do. The number of community organizations that came to the table to say, like, we want to help and bring our participants to this conversation was really, it was much more than we had anticipated and much more than we had budgeted too, but we're really excited to have that type of engagement on it. This is an 8-week turnaround that we're doing this project. And it was only about, I would say, 2 weeks that we had from the time that dates were set and flyers were ready and going out to have these groups. So long answer to your question is no, we didn't have targets. What we have done is, since we've seen who engaged in this work, is what Zakia had gone over earlier, which is where are the holes. I did notice up in the comments that somebody had asked if we had been in touch with the North American Indian Center of Boston. We haven't. Robin, would love if you can make a connection, that would be great. And definitely, you know, hoping to hear from this group too, like, what are other places that we're missing? You know, we're not, what I know for sure is we're in a time crunch still. People are hungry. COVID is happening now. It's been going on. So we don't want to take a lot more time to get too much more voices, because people need food now. And so we're using some of that urgency to get us to a final, to get us to a report, to get to the city for us to be able to start working on, but also recognizing this isn't it. We can iterate and adjust and change, and we can continue bringing in more voices. So we're trying to not make it perfect, and also get as much as we can. And you know, we got connected, just as an example, we got connected to Via Aid, who was able to give us some more insight around the Vietnamese community. And they don't have capacity to do the interviewing piece, but what we have been able to do is to talk to some of the staff to be able to really hear and understand what's going on in Fields Corner area. And so we can do that type of thing also, so that we can make sure that just different perspectives and experiences are getting thread into the report that's happening. That was a very long-winded answer to the question.
There was another question that had come in from Marcos as well, that was asking, just are there populations that might be represented in the reported population groups?
So we didn't necessarily ask questions to find out micro populations. I think that's what the question's asking. And so we do know employment status, so we could do something around that. That's probably really as far as we were able to do. Hannah, if I'm missing anything, please feel free.
I think it would be possible to do, probably not in time for what we're putting together for this report, but the data is the data, and it exists for the BFAC. And I think the interview data has enough information where you'd be able to start to organize it that way, but we weren't actually able to code the comments in the design session to particular people, just based on how we were getting the demographic information. But it certainly is possible with the interviews data.
Mm-hmm. I will say we did have, thanks to Omanique for this, we had a good pocket of people experiencing homelessness and a younger population also. And so, although I don't think we can necessarily identify who said what, like what Hannah just said, I feel like we did get a good number of folks coming to the table and being able to talk to that experience.
And then I'm not sure if you're seeing the most recent questions sort of talking about were the data collection were these random samples and what communities were surveyed, and then following on that, understanding that the methodology was to first seek out local groups and then pay them to identify interviewees, but how did you ensure the local groups were the best fit for selecting those interviewees?
Yeah. Zakia, I see you nodding your head. Did you want to say something?
I don't know if I could say best fit. Let me just say good fit. Personally, I looked for organizations that I knew had a connection to community residents experiencing food insecurity that I knew had been exaggerated by
I think we lost Zakia.
Yeah.
She'll come back. Her Wi-Fi's been messy today. Oh. Hey Zakia, we lost you for a while. You're back though. I will say this: just you're coming in and out quite a bit, Zakia. I don't know if there is a best fit. Again, this is being done in a pretty rapid fashion, and so Zakia came into this project when we knew we needed to get some community engagement in a way different than what I was going to be able to do. I wanted us to be able to engage with folks who were not always at the table and are not your typical players in these conversations, and Zakia delivered. And so that's what we're really excited about, is there's a lot of community members that haven't had the opportunity to give input on these types of processes before. So that was the intention of when we were looking for the group. What neighborhoods they came from. So there was a high representation of Dorchester and Mattapan. Part of that is because Mattapan Food and Fitness was in there, and many of the organizations are based in the Dorchester area. East Boston, we had one of the organizations that's participating in the weekly meetings, Maverick Landing. They were one of the groups that was able to do this. And so we were able to get some of a representation. We know we don't have enough, so we're going to try to do more. But the other areas like Charlestown, Alston Brighton, we did get a little bit of that from the Brazilian Workers Center. You know, we weren't going to spend time in West Roxbury. Hyde Park we are missing stuff from Hyde Park. And so we know we didn't get anything from there. I think there was 1 or 2 participants from that area. And again, as I was saying before, like, we're open to bringing more in, and we have to finish this too. Like we've got to like put pencils down at some point as well. But we're continuing to have like one-on-one conversations with folks over the next couple of weeks and try to thread stuff in as much as possible.
The last question, I think, before we dive into the breakouts would be the next steps and the projected timeline, which
so we'll get to that.
Okay.
Why don't we move into, but I did see something in here though about the money. Great question. So this entire process has been full transparency. Everything is on a shared drive that everybody has access to, the budget, the proposal, everything has been done as a collective. Health Leads, the organization, is just facilitating this process, but this is not our project. We're providing the Zoom, we're setting up the agenda, but this is a group process. Proposal was written collectively on Google Docs. People could put comments in and come in and out as they want. The report is also going to be collectively written. And so I invite any and all to be a part of that process. It'll be a messy Google Doc, but we'll do the best that we can. And so that $50,000, so I think it's probably actually going to be more than half of it is going back into the community organizations. Just 10 organizations alone at $1,500 each is $15,000 spent for the organizations to do the recruiting and that work. And then at least another 5, if not more, is going to the payments for community members, for the meetings, for the focus groups, for the interviews. The rest of the meetings, some of it, so $7,500 went to HRIA, Health Resources in Action, to do the assessment and then to do the interview process, right? The analysis that they're doing with us right now. They helped us build the interview questionnaire as well as the whole group that was working together did some edits on the questions also. The rest of the money, we paid some money for a co-facilitator with Hannah to do the groups as they were building that out and the processes. The city has been paying for all the interpreter services that we have had on that. And then Health Leads, my organization, has also gotten some of the money too. I think Health Leads is probably like a $15,000 that is part of that. So you are more than welcome to get access to that budget. It is open for anybody to look at it, and we can get you into those shared drives and see that whenever you want.
Cool.
Okay. All right, Hannah, do you want to give the group process?
Yeah.
The breakout group process? Okay.
Yeah, if you can advance the slides.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So we don't have a ton of time, but we do want to hear from all of you as part of this whole process, just about what has stood out to you, what is surprising, and why. Is there anything missing that you would add about any or all of the themes that we shared? And we're going to break out into 4 different breakout groups. And just because we're going to have about 15 minutes, Jen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're just going to ask that it's not as an in-depth conversation, but making sure that we hear at least from every person at least once. You can always pass if there's anything that you want to add at this time. And also we'll pick out someone to, well, hopefully someone will volunteer to report back to the main group, because then we'll have a chance as a larger group to kind of share thoughts and what we heard. Any questions? So again, focusing on, things about what stood out to you, what was surprising. Is there anything missing that you would add?
Okay, so Lauren has been working to assign people to breakout groups as we've been talking. You're all going to receive a little pop-up on your screen that's going to say, do you want to join your group? Click join, and then we'll go off into our breakout groups.
Great.
Take it away, Lauren.
All
and
right.
I'll pull you, or Lauren, I'll let you know, actually, how about at 7:25, if you can pull us all back together.
Sounds like a plan. See you all in 18 minutes.
Cool. Thank you. Is the countdown not happening?
They're all like, they've all been called back and they're taking their sweet time.
No, you can do it where it pulls them back no matter what.
Oh, well, it says it'll close in 3 seconds. So they're about to come back. They're about
perfect. They're coming.
Yeah, there you go.
Here they come. I love that part of Zoom. It's the most efficient way to stop small group talks.
Hey, everyone, welcome back. I'm going to mute myself, Jen.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Okay, welcome back. Hannah, let me share my screen again. And Hannah, if you want to facilitate the group stuff, and I'll type in what we're hearing. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great. I realized my group, we didn't pick a volunteer. We just hopped right in. But I would love just to hear, maybe just open it up more informally if people heard something in their group discussion that they want to share with the rest of the BFAC. Just kind of opening it up for people to share things that they heard or discussions or things that they want to give voice to.
I'd like to go first just because I have another meeting I'm kind of late to. So I was in a group and we had more questions than things that we were surprised about. I think everyone in the group understood that COVID has just exacerbated issues that we've been having, that we've always had with food equity and food access, along with other issues as well that are connected. So, you know, how do we move ahead? How do we impact, and how are we going to be using this information to hold the city accountable? Those were some things that were kind of mentioned, so that this information that is being collected isn't just kind of done and swept away. And there was a little bit of talk about it was the $50,000 being used to identify issues, something that we really needed to have done. Though it was pushed back a little bit by someone saying that it was providing a platform for folks to voice their opinion, and also it kind of was giving money back to the organizations. But just wondering, like, if we know there's so much work to do, and there's not really any surprises with the trends in food and food insecurity. You know, what are we doing to put money back? And someone brought up, you know, maybe investing in a co-op, investing in more food production, more commercial kitchens. I'm assuming food production also maybe meant like more community garden space, or like specifically the kitchens for homeless folks to utilize. And the question I had asked is if there's any information that was being taken to figure out what people are spending their money on instead of, which I'm assuming is rent, and kind of seeing if that data was collected. Obviously, this is a food access group, but you know, maybe it's something where we should be getting behind rent moratoriums, because then people would have their extra money to spend, or they're not extra, but their money to spend on food, since that's where people are probably spending most of their money on. We kind of start to talk about how to think holistically, and folks were talking about how to holistically approach the issue of food insecurity, because maybe, because obviously things are connected, and I guess this is what I'm saying, but I guess just think about what we can do as a group to push back on whatever's going to get the most energy behind it. So if folks, you know, if we don't have enough energy behind increasing SNAP or doing this or that, but maybe there's most energy for us to stand behind saying food access would be increased by standing up for rent reductions, et cetera. So that's kind of our group, and it was nice to meet everyone. I'm gonna run off.
Thank you, Robin and Mara. All right, others.
I'll go ahead and go. It's tough to follow that, but we were discussing a lot of the same things. It was sort of hard for us not to get started thinking about, okay, so what are the action items that we're going to push for? Like, what are the policy things that we're really thinking about, or you know, other initiatives that aren't necessarily governmental. But one of our members pointed out that it seems unlikely that there's going to be a market-based solution, at least wholly. So we do need government intervention. So that was the main thing that we were thinking about, was how do we use this information? Who do we make sure sees it, you know, beyond the mayor? You know, how can we, I guess to that point, like hold the mayor accountable and give it to everybody? You know, how do we give this into as many hands as possible and say, this is what the people of Boston have said that they require from you? First of all, and that was the major theme. Some more detailed things, thinking about how many of the ratio of grocery stores around here that do accept SNAP, and are any of them, I think the answer is no, basically from what we heard in the group. None of them support the double up bucks program that MOFA has. So how can we encourage certainly local grocery stores or retailers to provide those incentives, as well as local chains, instead of, for instance, asking for donations for Feeding America? Maybe they could go right back here. I don't know. And then another thing is just, as was already brought up, there's just fewer stores. There's just less infrastructure. And certainly what is at those stores is some of the most expensively priced food in the nation. And I happen to point out that, I pointed out that we happen to, as a city, 93% of our food is trucked in from other places. So that might be something a link worth exploring. To those ends as well, one of the things that came up was local systems, community-based systems, both in, Daily Table was the only one that was mentioned. They're the only one that does. Thank you for pointing that out. Shoot. I shouldn't have.
It happens. It's all good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. I remember, I think. How can we, so there's the mutual aid aspect of the local ecosystem that people are asking for in one of the theme grids. There's the mutual aid aspect, and there's also the local food environment as a whole. And so I was thinking more about land-based solutions. And then Monet brought up a really good semantic sort of question in how the theme around accessibility and SNAP is written, or it's the stimulus is the word that's used. And we're concerned that there might be two aspects in play here. One being the stimulus check being cash relief in general, and secondly, the relaxation of requirements or restrictions on WIC and SNAP. So we're wondering, are both of those things being alluded to here, or just to make sure we know what we're talking about? I think that's all we have.
Yes, I think both of those things are. I think they both came up as themes, as people recognizing the having additional cash made food more accessible, and having more flexibility, but also the need to reform some of the eligibility issues. But unfortunately, we're going to have to.
No, that's it.
We're going to have to move forward, but I think Jen is going to talk about next steps in ways that all of you can continue to stay involved over the next couple of weeks, and for this report, but also beyond the report. So Jen, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thanks, Hannah. Arun, not sure if you saw the chat, but can you put the link in again for folks who are here, community members that are here? So if you are here as a community member, we want to make sure you get paid, and so we will mail you either a Visa card or an Amazon card. And so put your info in there in the Google Doc. Okay. Let's see here. So we're going to move on. We'll make sure that all of the folks who were facilitating those conversations were taking notes. So we'll make sure that that is all getting patched back into what we were doing. So next steps, because you guys have some voting to do. So we want to make sure that you have time to do that. So here's where we are. We're doing the share back right now. In what we did today was part of the work that we had going on this week. We have our project meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If you want to come, I'll put the Zoom link in there in the chat when I pass it over to Lauren. And then in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be writing. We're going to be coming back, and we'll have another community meeting on the 15th to review the recommendations. And then we'll get the report to the city by the end of that week. So December 18th is our deadline. These are our next steps. If you want to get more involved, we would love to have you, anybody. This is an open invitation for anyone that wants to be at the table. Again, we meet Thursdays at 1 p.m. and the December 15th, 4 to 5:30 share back. If you are interested, you can email ebfe@healthleadsusa.org, or if you know any of the steering committee members, they also have been involved in this throughout, and feel free to reach out to any one of them as well. Thank you for your time and for engaging and listening and being a part of this. We're excited to keep this going. And Lauren, I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you everyone for participating in the breakout groups. Thank you to Jen and to Zakia and Hannah and Keely for the presentation and for facilitating those breakout groups as well. So as Jen just alluded, we are working our way up to sort of the other big piece of tonight's meeting. So bear with me for a second. I just need to share my screen back so that we can go over the election process. All right, hopefully everyone can see this. If you can't, just unmute yourself and yell at me, but otherwise we'll dive on in. So I think we kicked off the meeting and we were sort of trying to figure out if anyone needed translation and running through some best practices. So now that we're diving into the steering committee elections, let me just take a step back and say, because I don't think I did. My name is Lauren Palumbo and I'm the co-chair alongside Monet Vance, who's also here on the call tonight. Of the BFAC steering committee. We have many other steering committee members here with us this evening. There are 9 of us in total, and we sort of serve as the administrative back end, sort of behind the curtain facilitators of the Boston Food Access Council. Sorry about that. We liaise with working groups, we facilitate the public meetings, and try to make sure that the mission of the Food Access Council is continuing to move forward. With the 9 steering committee members, we were formed at elections this time last year. This is the sort of new look steering committee after the Boston Food Access Council went through a bit of a sort of transformation process into its current iteration. And we spent the beginning of this year, 2020, sort of working on our bylaws. And in those bylaws, we stipulated that the terms for steering committee members would be 2 years long and that elections would occur annually at the December BFAC meeting, which is where we are this evening, obviously. What we also did was we agreed to stagger of the 9 of us that 4 folks would opt into basically a 1-year term and step down at the end of this year and potentially rerun or not, but that would allow us to basically bring in fresh or new faces to the steering committee every year, so that the whole steering committee is not turning over every 2 years. So this year's elections, to be clear, are for positions that will run through December 2022 through the elections at that meeting. So it is for the next 2 years. And this year we have 4 open seats and we have 5 applicants. If you're receiving our emails, hopefully you received the candidate profiles, but don't worry, we can reshare that with you if you haven't seen it. But what I would like to do for about the next 10 minutes or so is I would just like to go in order and ask each of the applicants to unmute themselves and to share briefly a little bit about their background and about why they are interested in running for a seat on the steering committee. So with that said, Oscar, I believe you are first up on the list. If you're here, can you unmute yourself? I believe that Oscar was here before, but perhaps we lost them. So I'll keep moving for timeliness. And Nicole, I know you're here, so if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, and again, just share in a couple minutes, just sort of your background and why you're interested in running.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name's Nicole St. Louis. I currently live in Brighton, and I've been living in Boston for about 10 years now. I'm running as an individual community member for the steering committee because I've always had a passion for food. I grew up in a primarily Chinese family, and so pretty much every gathering there was centered around cooking and food and discovering new recipes. And when I came to Boston for college, I got involved in our community service center, and that's where I kind of learned and dived into food justice and food recovery. And in my upperclassmen years, I managed BU's food rescue program. And that was where my passion really took off for this issue area, as well as this council in general. During my 2 years in that role, I was able to double our capacity, both in delivering food to our community partners, as well as overall student volunteering opportunities. I am extremely passionate about finding ways to connect people to food in all different ways and bringing different voices to the table to contribute to what that looks like across both city and greater Massachusetts. And I hope I can bring that drive to the council. I have been an active member of the policy and fundraising groups, like Elise mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. I've been very involved in getting an accountant to help process any funds that we hopefully will soon be securing to advance the group's priorities. And so I'm extremely excited by the opportunity to help drive each group forward and connect with each of you, either on a group or an individual level. So I hope you'll consider voting for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And I just want to reiterate, I forgot to mention it when I asked you all to introduce yourselves, but Nicole is running as a community representative, not an organizational representative. The steering committee is made up of a mix of both types of members. And so just so everyone is aware, folks are either running as a representative of the organization at which they serve or as an individual community member. And Nicole is running as a community member. And now, Megan, if you're here, could you unmute yourself and share your background?
Yeah, can you hear me? Great, thanks.
Yes.
Hey everyone, my name is Megan Huang. I'm the program director at Fresh Truck, the Fresh Truck Mobile Market, which is a program of About Fresh. About Fresh is a nonprofit organization based here in Boston, and we build solutions to integrate healthy food into community health systems. And Fresh Truck specifically is a grocery store on wheels. So we go all across the city, currently at 18 different locations, and provide low-cost fresh fruits and vegetables to different neighborhoods of Boston. Community is a huge part of About Fresh's work. It's really the center of our work. Not only in my work do we travel to many different locations around the city through our Fresh Truck Mobile Market program, providing food for people, but we also ground all of our organizational decisions in conversations with residents and with local partners to make sure that the programs that we're designing are aligned with what residents need and what they want. Personally, I building and maintaining partnerships and going out to markets, talking to shoppers, getting to interact with people are two of my favorite parts of my job. We work with many different residents in different neighborhoods, and we also work with a lot of different groups, social service agencies, food pantries, health centers, faith-based organizations, and many others. Currently, I participate in the Education and Engagement Committee and also the Equitable Boston Food Access Committee as well. And I've really enjoyed my participation in those, and that's why I'm excited to run for the organizational seat on the steering committee to both deepen About Fresh's community-centric work, but also to help the Boston Food Access Council continue to bring more resident voices to the table. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Megan. Maritza, are you here and able to unmute yourself? You are next on the list. Great, we can hear you, go right ahead.
Hi, Maritza Rosario, I am with the Food Project. The Food Project is a nonprofit that brings young people together and adults across differences to create a just food system. The reason we want to be on the council is because we want to continue our work. We want to continue the advocacy. We want to continue listening to the voices of our community. We want to work side by side. So all our work, we wanted to make sure it's relevant and that it represents the need, and not because the food project thinks we have the best practices. We know the best practices come from the people, from the residents, and that's how we like, to everything that we do. That's how we do it. And I like to be part of this because I think those voices are here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Maritza. And then finally, Annalise Shepard, I'm turning it over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Annalise Shepard. I am running for the steering committee as a community member, but I'm also the current intern for BFAC. I have been sort of behind the scenes administrative and philosophical, maybe help, quote unquote, this season. And I'm running for steering committee because this is my life's work. This is the only thing that I really care about. I'm coming at it from an academic perspective. I'm an environmental science and policy master's student at Northeastern. I'm actually finishing up in a couple weeks. And food and issues of food access and food justice specifically has been at the root of my exploration for 6 years now. Just immediately recognizing through my environmental science classes that food and our relationships to food and the land and each other is central to a lot of social justice issues. And so food can be a vehicle, and should be and needs to be a vehicle to deal with a lot of the issues that we have going on, namely resulting from white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal, hegemonic society. And I think that that's what we need to do, is call it what it is and attack it in its explicit forms. And so I am here to emphasize and uplift the voices of who I believe to be the experts, which are the most marginalized people. There's women of color. So like Maritza was saying, Maritza, sorry, I'm nervous. I'm always wanting to defer to the experts, and I think that the best way that I could be a steering committee member would be to steward the power and responsibility that you're giving me as members. I really want to get into policy and real actionable steps. I don't just want to sit on this information and talk to you guys about it ad nauseum. I want to take it and do things with it and get each and every one of us involved, boots on the ground, hands dirty, improving food access for each and every one of us. So I'm excited to help however I can. Thanks.
Thank you all. I'm checking the list and it doesn't look like Oscar has rejoined us. So I did drop the candidate profiles link into the chat. So I would encourage everyone to take a look there. There's some additional information there from each of the candidates. Following this evening's meeting, an email will go out with the link to the election form rather. It's pretty straightforward. It's a Google form. We are collecting email addresses so that we can have some level of voter accountability to ensure that folks are only voting once. So please do go ahead and complete the election form when you receive that email. And I will say that, Annalise, with that.
I will not be involved.
Yes.
In that process.
Yeah, I just wanted that. Thank you. Just in case anyone was concerned, no, Annalise does not have access to the results. So, so just so everyone is aware, the election form will come out. It will be open for just over 48 hours until 10 p.m. on Friday evening, at which point we will close the form and stop accepting votes. If you are not on our email list and you didn't receive it, if you registered for, or if you filled out the attendance form this evening, we'll make sure to add the folks that filled out that form to the email list. We are sending, just so everyone is understanding, we are sending the election form to all folks on the BFAC mailing list. So it is not just the folks that were able to join us here tonight, or the folks that might stay tuned and watch the recording when we post it. It's a broad list of a few hundred contacts. So so everyone is aware, and that is the bulk of the information around the elections. thank you in advance to everyone for taking the time to cast your votes. We'll be working, not Annalise, we will be working to tally the votes this weekend, and we'll announce new steering committee members next week. New steering committee members will take their seats on the steering committee starting in January with the new term. And if anyone has any questions on elections, please feel free to drop it in the chat and I will address them, or we will address them as a steering committee. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to share. Oh, here we go. Okay. Just some next steps and action items for everyone to stay engaged with the Boston Food Access Council as we move forward into the new year. We have new working group chairs. We have what will be new steering committee members. We will have the report and the sort of next steps that we can take from the EBFE program group rather, and we're looking forward to sort of really bringing that energy forward into the new year and bringing that to the city. If you know anyone, if you know anyone that's interested in taking Annalise's seat as our intern, because she will be done at the end of this semester as our intern, we are actively looking for an intern for the winter and spring semester next year. It is incredibly important that we get folks into the internship position, and ultimately that is something that helps us stay successful and make sure that meeting notes are taken and that emails are sent out and that things are communicated to folks. So if you know anyone that is interested, I will post the link shortly to the internship listing and how to apply. We also have a Facebook group and a Slack workspace, and you can also get our email updates, which will allow you to stay connected with BFAC and get things like that election form. Our upcoming meetings are we meet 4 times a year publicly. The working groups meet regularly in between those meetings, but our public meetings happen in March, June, September, and December. The next one would be March 3rd. It'll be again at 6 to 8 p.m. It will, of course, still be Zoom at that time. We'll leave TBD for June, although most likely still a Zoom meeting. While I get these links out to share with folks, I just want to acknowledge that there's a question that came in privately to the chat about clarifying our plans and timeframe in respect to nonprofit status. And I will vaguely state, because this is something that is very much still in process, the fundraising working group is working with the steering committee to analyze the different opportunities that could be present, as whether or not we pursue our own nonprofit status, whether or not we look to seek a fiscal sponsor as an organization. I would expect that we would definitely have an update on that in the coming months, but I think it's a conversation that's very much still in process. So I apologize that I don't have a complete answer there.
And isn't co-op an option too? We're thinking about just what our council structures, what are usually the structure for councils, and usually, yeah, maybe a nonprofit, but what is the best way for us? Is it going to be a co-op structure or what?
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Monique. So if anyone, has thoughts to contribute to that conversation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, our email address is bostonfoodaccesscouncil@gmail.com, and that's how you can reach the steering committee as a whole. I've just gone ahead and dropped into the chat a few things: the link to the internship posting for the winter spring, the link to the Facebook group, the link to the Slack channel, and also the link so that you can sign up to receive our emails. I will just go ahead and post the attendance form one last time, because again, if we don't have your email address, if this is your first meeting, please do be sure to sign up for that and make sure that you give us your email address so that we can send you the election form. And then we have another question about how can we partake in working groups? There is a form that I can try to pull. If any of the steering committee members have access to that link, I don't have it in my notes, but I can pull it up or send it out. There is a working group interest form where basically you provide your contact information and which working groups you are interested in. And from there, we add you to the rosters that the working groups chairs then email every time they're scheduling a meeting of their working group. So, and I think Annalise is working to pull that form link up so everyone hang on for 1 second and we'll have that in the chat. Any other questions that we can answer in the meantime? Okay, and Annalise just dropped that working group interest form into the chat. Thank you. Okay. Well, I wish everyone a wonderful holiday season and stay safe, wear your mask, stay home if you can. And we will share the election form out with everyone shortly. Again, it stays open until Friday at 10 p.m. And we will continue to update folks on the election results next week, as well as share out the recording of this meeting. And Jen has also posted earlier in the chat the link to the Zoom for tomorrow's EBFE group meeting. So please continue to stay engaged. We look forward to seeing you all again in March and at working group meetings in between.